as usual.
Mm.
So yeah, the PowerPoints we've got on here will cover.
Mm.
So again, it depends on the subject you're assessing and the method you choose. There will be positive and negative aspects of each. These are known as strengths and limitations. So what may be a strength and a subject might be a limitation for another.
Another. Okay.
List the strengths and limitations of 4 informal and 4 formal methods of assessment you identified earlier. So again, if you go back through there, that will show you those.
Yeah.
So again, if you have learners with any particular needs or requirements, you consider how those can be met. You may have to adapt the assessment method to work with those. I'll give you an example. If you've got one of your learners has, you're setting, for instance, exam, a test, a written test, and one of your learners has sight problems.
Okay.
Now, you could get somebody to actually write down the answers for them, rather than them have to do it themselves, because it would, create a difficulty for them that shouldn't be there. So what you're doing then is adapting your assessment method, to meet the needs of a particular learner, and that's the way of looking at that. It could be anything. It could be a hearing problem where you've got somebody that needs to sign or sign language or something of that nature. But again, you've got to be able to adapt your assessment method to suit the learner's needs. But again,
can I ask a question?
If you have learners with particular needs, always check with your organisation regarding what you can and can't do, or what you may need approval for to make what they call reasonable adjustments.
Okay.
In any context, the assessor is the linchpin of the whole system. There are quality assurance that go after them. There is teaching before that, but the assessor links the two together and has to do a number of things to meet those needs of the learners and naturally the organisation as well. So it's again adapting or providing resources for a learner who is partially sighted, adapting a learner who is physically disabled, someone with dyslexia, could be another language barrier, such as sign language, which I mentioned, and of course, date and time for the learners who work shifts. To give an example, when I was a peripatetic assessor, in some cases I had to go in on night shift to do the assessment at 2 o'clock in the morning. Again, liaising with others that can offer advice regarding any financial concerns about getting to the site or coming into the college and so forth. Well, those are just examples, So again, it's providing specialist support staff, providing assessment information in an alternative format, using a different location where it's more accessible to learners who may have to travel distances, or using different assessment activities to suit individual learning preferences, but using new and emerging technologies to help improve confidence with computer skills. You can use large print, braille, or alternative support mechanisms for learners with particular needs. So again, the quiz on the end of here is, once you've done that, ask yourself, what is formative, what is summative, how can you choose method of assessment, state one assessment method of your choice and give 2 strengths and limitations for it, and give an example of, learner needs along with how it can be met. So those are just a little quiz that would help with the subject for you, and that actually covers that one altogether. But there are also a couple of handouts on here as well, which I'll open up. So this is quite a long handout, but it gives some information regarding, I'm not going to go all through that, you can read that at your leisure really, but I'll just go on to explain what it's about and why it's here.
Okay.
Again, research on 4 topics helps to increase understanding and background knowledge of the areas. Further examination of these topics will allow you to think about the way in which we teach our learners to be able to incorporate the ideas and illustrate the process of teaching and learning using these methods. So assessment is a method that measures the extent and degree of learning. So again, it's just showing or giving more detail to the PowerPoint we've just looked at. These would be probably the form of notes I put together, I think, to actually give the presentation in live, if you like, or not online. Yeah, it is. I'm just checking back on. It's a while since I did that one. Okay, we can't put that down. So the PowerPoint one is on key concepts and principles assessment. We'll have a quick look at that one. We've got very big, these. So the presentation covers a slightly different area than what we've looked at previously. It's why should assessment take place, the key concepts of assessment, the principles of assessment, VAXA and SMART. SMART you've probably seen before, VAXA you may have not have. Roles and responsibilities of an assessor, regulations and legislation relating to assessment, policies and procedures. Again, there's a summary quiz in here and a reading list on there. So why do you think assessment should take place? Well, it's to make sure learning's occurred. And I actually take that a stage further. Learning in its own terms means you've learned something, yeah? But have you understood it? Yeah?
Okay.
I always add an understanding into there. For example, the skills, competence, knowledge, understanding, and or attitudes needed at a given point. If you didn't assess, you wouldn't know whether learning had taken place. And this is why the change has been over the years to assessment practice rather than just end tests or exams. Oops. So principles are how the assessment process is put into practice. For example, is it being ethical? Is it being fair? And is it safe? The 2 important principles are VAXA and SMART. Is it valid? Is it authentic? Is it current? Is it sufficient? And is it reliable? Yeah? Now, those are the methods you use to assessment. They must be valid, and they must be authentic, and they must be current, and the information you receive from the learner must be current as well. Some awarding bodies now insist that if you've not got evidence of what it's asking for within the last 2 years, even if you've done it previously, it's not sufficient. Don't automatically hold with that. There may be extensive circumstances that mean that would be not relevant to a certain person. But anyway, that's just my take on that. Is it sufficient? Is there enough information there to show understanding? A lot of the time, the fortunate bit is with the assessment process that the awarding bodies that lay down the rules and regulations also put in guidelines for assessors so that you're not on your own sort of thing. And they also add things like indicative content, the sort of thing that should be in the student's work when you actually assess it. So that makes the process of determining whether it's sufficient is to be able to say, yeah, I can pass that. Those things do really help with that. SMART, of course, is smart, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Yeah. It's mentioned in many other areas as well. So your main role will be to carry out the assessment according to the qualification requirements or those of the programme or job specification being assessed. You'll need to follow all internal and external organisation requirements. This is why I said the awarding bodies, external organisations, do give assistance to the assessors quite extensively now. Not all of them, some of them are a bit remiss, but others now are getting very good at putting stuff in to support assessors. Now it mentions internal. The next stage from assessment is for work that's been assessed by different assessors to be sampled by an internal quality assurer who will make sure that the assessments are being done equally and fairly across the qualifications. So, responsibilities. Ooh, make me a list. So things like attending meetings, negotiating assessment plans, making best use of different assessment types and methods, reviewing progress with the learner and standardising practice with other assessors, and completing and maintaining records. The last one being highly important. You need to record stuff on the documents that your organisation provides and make sure that they are signed and dated and so forth, because the standardisation practice done by the quality assurer will make sure all this is done, and also it will show the work that you're assessing being assessed by other assessors and the results that have come from those as well. So other parts of the job are giving constructive and developmental feedback to learners, looking at any barriers to fair assessment, making judgments based on the assessment requirements. And those are basically the learning objectives and the assessment criteria in our case, yeah, and maintaining and professional development. That is making sure that yourself are up to date with everything, all the areas that you're assessing. Again, and supporting learners with special assessment requirements and dealing with sensitive issues in a supportive manner.
Okay.
So you'll need to follow certain regulations of the or regulatory bodies such as Ofqual and Ofsted, the awarding organisations who accredit the qualifications, legal aspects such as data protection, health and safety at work act, etc., safeguarding vulnerable groups, Equality Act, Counter-Terrorism and Security Act. Those are a number of areas that the assessor is involved with depending on who is being assessed and what they're being assessed doing. So not all of those will be necessary, but maybe at some stage.
Okay.
So Data Protection Act, and this is where the material that you send to your assessor is only accessible by your assessor and anybody else in the organisation that is allowed to see it. In other words, the internal and external quality assurers.
Okay.
They are the only people technically. If the work you're sending in is paper-based, then there must be somewhere to store that under lock and key that only certain people have access to.
Okay.
And this is very important now under the Data Protection Act.
Okay.
So the Act actually contains 8 principles, so fairly and lawfully, only for the specific and lawful purpose. It's adequate, relevant, and not excessive. It's kept for no longer than necessary. It's processed in accordance with the individual's rights. It's kept secure, which is the main area, and transferred only to countries that offer adequate protection. That again is relevant in some cases, but not all. Health and Safety at Work Act places legal responsibilities on you as well as the organisation of you and your learners. if you see a potential hazard, it's your responsibility to do something about it before an accident occurs, even if this is just reporting it to the relevant person within your organisation. This goes a little further if you are in a position where you'll be assessing out in somebody else's workplace. Then you would expect them then to have done a risk assessment for you to see before you enter the premises. Also, you may need to be provided with protective equipment. If you were going onto a building site, you'd need a high-vis jacket and goodness knows what. Besides that, before you'd be able to get access to the site. Now, you also need a health and safety pass card that you would have to have completed before you go onto site these days, as well as even as an assessor.
Okay.
So looking at safeguarding of vulnerable groups, the latest Act 2006, it looks at your duties as responsibilities that those providing health and social care or education services have to perform to protect individuals and vulnerable people from harm. The disclosure and barring service is in place to check on staff if necessary. Quality Act has replaced all previous anti-discrimination legislation and was consolidated into one act. It provides rights for people not to be discriminated against or harassed because they have an association with a disabled person or are wrongly perceived as disabled. Counter-terrorism will apply if you work with learners who are at risk of becoming radicalised. The prevent duty is part of this act, and the prevent duty and safeguarding resources are available free on there. So again, the organisation that you work for will also have policies and procedures in place that you have to follow.
Okay.
Those, well, it might include access to fair assessment, appeals and complaints they will definitely have, confidentiality of information will be there, copyright and data protection, equal ops, health and safety, and internal quality insurance. Those will be part of that. For instance, I'll give you one, the last one, internal quality assurance. There will be a time limit on when work is sent in electronically and when it must be sent back to the learner. It mustn't exceed that time. If it's a portfolio, a paper-based portfolio that's going into a centre, it's actually less than that. It depends on the organisation, but most organisations want to see portfolios in, checked and out again within about 10 days.
Okay.
So if an assessor, you put a portfolio in to be checked, if after a week or so you've not received it back, you can be asking your internal quality assurer, where's my portfolios? So again, it's got a little quiz at the end that you can have a look at as well in that.
Okay.
Now, all of the stuff for Unit 6 is in here. I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm just giving you a taste of those. But it will follow the same principle as Unit 1. You'll start with... let me find them. Yeah. A bit bigger. Right, you can hit that. Yeah, I put that in because one of my learners started to write all the answers in here rather than on a separate Word document. But yeah, that will be then at the head of. I will put this when you send the work in. I'll put this sheet and change the detail on the top. On the work that you send in, I will then start to do my assessment of it. So basically, if you can put together evidence for 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then a little box set up for comparing the strengths and limitations of a range of assessment methods to meet those needs. If we can make a go at those two first, I'll just give you a quick summary of the other learning objectives in this unit. Because it has a longer one than the other. It's got 8 of these.
Long.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But actually, once you've done the first 2 learning objectives, it actually sets it up for you be able to answer the other bits more readily, because it will be what are the main factors when you plan an assessment? Yeah, so things like who's going to be involved, where it's going to be done, what's going to be assessed, and those are the things that will be in a plan. So I always put together, if you've got at your establishment or anything, documents that can, in the form of a plan, then use those. But on here, there will be, we've got some. We've got some things on here that may be actually in the assessment sheet as well. I'll have a look at those and transfer them over if necessary. These are documents that you can use, like there'll be a sample assessment plan, yeah, and you can fill it in for a couple of learners, yeah, and then it'll be easy just to explain that. Oops, jumped again. Hello 102, hello 3. So again, if you've got a plan that you've made out, you can then refer to that in your answer to 3.1. The benefits of using an holistic approach, actually, it's spelled wrong, it should be holistic approach to assessment. And then how to plan an holistic approach to assessment. What you would need to do to go through the planning stage. And so again, like I give you an example of looking at a job of work and see what units fall out of that rather than going the other way around, yeah?
Okay.
Some types of risks that may be involved in the assessment, and again, on the PowerPoint you'll have some answers to that, and explain how to minimise risks through planning the process. 4 is looking at the importance of involving learners and others in the assessment process. Summarise the types of information that should be made available to learners involved in the assessment process. And explain how peer and self-assessment, which we looked at first actually, can be used effectively to promote learner involvement and personal responsibility in the assessment process. Explain how assessment arrangements can be adapted to meet the needs of individual learners, which we covered earlier as well, yeah. Explain how to judge whether evidence is sufficient, authentic and current, yeah. So that's the learner's work. And then explain to ensure how the assessment decisions are made against specified criteria are valid, reliable and fair. And that's referring to the methods of assessment that have been used in terms of the particular thing that's being assessed. 6 looks at evaluating the importance of quality assurance in the assessment process, and this is where the quality assurer will lay down some various rules for the assessors and what they need to do, but also is there to support them as well. Summarise quality assurance standardisation procedures in your own area of practice. Summarise the procedures to follow when there are disputes. Explain the importance of following procedure of the management of information in relation to assessment. And explain how feedback and questioning contribute to the assessment process. 8.1 is looking at legal issues, policies and procedures relevant to the assessment, including those for confidentiality, health, safety and welfare. Explain the contribution how the technology can make the assessment process. Evaluate the requirements for equality and diversity where appropriate. It can be bilingualism in relation to assessment. It may be that you need to bring, there may be a situation where you have to bring an interpreter or somebody that could speak the language of the learner to make sure that the assessment was fair.
Okay.
Again, the last bit is looking at the value of reflective practice in yourself and continuing professional development in the assessment process. And this is where you can make an explanation of the value of reflective practice and how you would go about it, and where that links into your own continual professional development. And sometimes, if you've not got a PDP plan, I think there is one up there. Back again, sorry. Yeah, PDP template, there is one. Yeah, so you can actually use that. Yeah, and there's a SWOT analysis if you wanted to do that one on yourself first to see what your strengths and weaknesses in the assessment area were. Yeah, and then you can fill in a PDP template to show where you're going to improve and how you're going to improve that. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, a big unit, this one, but we'll do it piecemeal, like I said. And if we look at the learning objectives 1 and 2 first, the stuff that you learn and pick up in those 2 learning objectives will assist you, actually, you can see, right through the qualification after that.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem. Yeah.
Have you got any questions?
So much. No, I'm fine. Okay, I think I wanted to ask a question on meeting learners' needs. When you were talking about assessments, as regards to learners' needs, like a method of assessment, like you said, so maybe you have a blind student, someone who has a vision impairment, and you know the person cannot write. I wanted to ask, if I cannot bring in someone to write for that person, can I give the person like a question and answer section?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that was just one method I used. It could be that you for the actual course, there is Braille Braille copies already in place. You could use those, yeah. There are a whole host of things, depending on what you've got to assist you. But yeah, at the end of the day, it could be a sat-down question and answer form, or in terms of a teaching assistant could actually take that form off the role of the teacher, because obviously if you were doing that with one student, it will leave other students might need your time, and then you would be jumping about from one place to the other. So yeah, where you could bring in someone to help actually do that, which would be the same thing, of course. They would actually be asking the questions and recording the answers from the learner. So yeah, that's how you adapt the assessment method to achieve the same result. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just sent you the 3.1 of the assessment to you.
Sorry.
I sent an assessment to you.
Yeah. Whatever method.
3.1.
Sorry. You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Sorry. I sent in an assessment this morning to you, Chevron box.
I didn't get any of that, unfortunately.
Okay. I'll just message you now.
I've got the chat on. No, put the chat in.
Okay, I sent you an assessment this morning. Did you get me?
Yeah, I'm just going to do that now. It's back.
I'm coming.
Hi, John, I'm going to ring you now because I'm just not picking any of that up at all. It's just breaking up.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's sign out now. Then you
I'll
ring
just
me.
give you a quick ring.
Okay.
When my phone decides to work. Right. Could be ringing you now.
I had a feel.
I got you now.
Yeah, I said I just sent him an assessment this morning to 2.1 and 3.2. Then when I talked to you said Ramjit, right? I was able to drop in the video and then send him the file for so then I'll justify for him to say now I'm done with that. For me to round up with you, then I will speak to what's his name, Ramjit on the Dropbox thing, so I can get the videos over to you. But 3.1, 3.2 have been sent to you this morning.
Yeah. What? You're going to start off now with the Word document, yes?
So when I after the video, right, I'm going to speak to Ramjit on the Dropbox.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I'm able to drop sending the field, but I sent in 3.1
Yeah.
and 3.2, which is my lesson plan.
Yeah.
And justify my resources and assessment method that I use. I've sent that assessment just before this lesson to Chevron Box.
Yeah, okay, that's no problem. I'll pick that up. Yeah.
When I finish up with you now, I'll call Ranjit, right? Then tell them how to grab all the Dropbox thing.
Yeah.
Because they've been ready for weeks now.
Yeah, and once we've got that, I can put them into your folder on here then, and we've got those, and we're then ready to, I'll make an assessment of those and send them back. But usually once you've got that done, it's usually straightforward. If the video's fulfilling the requirements, then there's no issue.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for attending this morning, and I'll close the meeting now, and speak to you soon.
All right.